Franklin was an ordinary student from a small town who studied at a university in a neighboring city. Every weekend, he would return home to visit his family and take a break from the city hustle. That night, he stayed later than usual. He needed to finish an important project, and it was already past midnight when he got into his car. The road home passed through a forest. It was an old, rarely used route, with a single lane and no streetlights. Franklin knew this road like the back of his hand, as he had driven it since childhood, but something about it felt unsettling that night. The forest looked particularly dark, and the silence outside seemed oppressive. After driving for about half an hour, Franklin noticed a figure on the roadside ahead. It was a young woman. She stood in a long black dress that fluttered slightly in the wind, and her face was barely visible in the dim glow of the headlights. She was holding something resembling a small purse. Why? Franklin slowed the car and stopped beside her. He rolled down the window and asked, "Do you need a ride?" "Yes, if it's not too much trouble," she replied softly, her voice melodic but cold. "I need to get to a house on Forest Street." Franklin recognized the address. It was not far from his home. He invited her to get in, and she quietly slid into the back seat. She hardly spoke. Franklin tried to start a conversation several times, but she gave short answers, as if uninterested. Her gaze was fixed on the road, but every now and then, Franklin caught her looking at him through the rearview mirror. Her eyes were strangely deep, as if they held a hidden sadness. When they arrived at an old house on the outskirts of town, the girl asked him to stop. It was a dilapidated, half-ruined mansion with faded windows and peeling paint. She thanked him softly, stepped out of the car, and disappeared into the darkness of the yard. Franklin was about to drive away, but noticed that she had left a pendant on the back seat, a small silver locket with an intricate design. Thinking it might be important, he decided to return it the next morning. The next day, Franklin drove to the house where he had dropped her off. An elderly woman opened the door. When Franklin explained that he had brought back a pendant that belonged to her daughter, the woman froze, then whispered, "That's impossible." She went on to explain that her daughter had died 10 years ago in a car accident. That evening, while driving on the same road, her car veered off the roadside and crashed. The girl had been wearing a black dress, the same one she had received for her birthday, and this pendant had been around her neck at the time of the accident. Franklin couldn't believe his ears. He tried to explain that he had seen her, given her a ride, and she had gotten into his car. The woman shook her head and quietly said, "You're not the first. Every year, on the night of her death, someone sees her on that road. She always returns home, but no one ever sees her again." Franklin felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at the pendant still in his hand and noticed a small crack on it, as if it had been struck hard. When he got back into his car, he suddenly noticed a clear handprint on the rear window. It was too fresh, as if someone had just touched the glass. From that day on, Franklin never drove down that road at night again. He left the pendant with the old woman, understanding that it belonged to only one person, even if she had been gone for a long time.